Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to The Claverings by Anthony Trollope. We just recently had a hilarious chapter, a very funny chapter, where Captain Boodles is thwarted completely by Sophie Gordeloup. She's way too much for him because she acts literally insane and demands a ton of money for doing nothing. But that was, it was funny. It was a lot of fun, but it was definitely a pause before we get back to the more serious subject. Remember, Harry Clavering is the alleged hero of this story, and he just recently left the Burton household, where he confessed himself to Cecilia Burton. He confessed that he has proposed marriage to two women, Florence Burton and Julia Ongar. And for a second, Cecilia Burton's goodwill, her affection for Harry, is overcome by anger, and she repudiates him. But then she gets down on her knees and grabs his knee and says, no one knows about this. Florence doesn't know about this. And she doesn't interact with Julia. So surely we can make this work. Surely we can make this work, and you will be one of us again. Now, we know that in the meantime, Sophie Gordeloup has sent off a poisonous letter, anonymously, describing everything. So this is not going to stay a secret for long. But in the meantime, Harry leaves the Burton household, promising Cecilia Burton that he will go and write to her, that he'll write to her within a couple of days, expressing everything. He's overcome by emotion when he's talking to her. Doesn't feel like he can do it then. And that is where we find him in our current chapter, which is chapter 31. I mentioned yesterday that we're getting closer and closer to the end of this book, and that we should probably start seriously thinking about what we're going to read next. I got bombarded with emails, and I wanted to stress to some of you that I can't read you out loud a book that is under copyright. I would be sued for that. I would have to, at the very least, take down the videos. So it'd be a waste of time, a waste of your time, a waste of my time. I don't want to be sued. The book has to be in the popular domain. So those of you, what suggestions did I get? One of you wanted me to read Wolf Hall out loud. Nothing would give me greater pleasure. But it's not allowed. It's not permissible. One of you wanted me to read the first of the Prentice Alvin books, Seventh Son. I would love to read Orson Scott Card's prose out loud. I would love to do that. And a number of you mentioned a bunch of biographies that are all still in copyright, so it can't be that. But we're perfectly free with the Claverings. So we are reading Harry Clavering's confession, and we get a little picture of him at his writing table with his boyish, unshaven, boyish, clean face. I have to warn you ahead of time, your estimation of Harry Clavering, communally speaking, in this read-aloud, our estimation of Harry Clavering is not very high. It's not going to go up because of this chapter. Just so you know. Harry Clavering, when he went away from Onslow Crescent after his interview with Cecilia Burton, was a wretched, pitiable man. He had told the truth of himself as far as he was able to tell it. No, he hasn't. No, he didn't. To a woman whom he thoroughly esteemed, and having done so, was convinced that she could no longer entertain any respect for him. He had laid bare to her all his weakness, and for a moment she had spurned him. It was true that she had again reconciled herself to him, struggling to save both him and her sister from future misery, that she had even condescended to implore him to be gracious to Florence, taking that which to her mind seemed to be the surest path to her object. But not the less did he feel that she must despise him. Having promised his hand to one woman, to a woman whom he still professed he loved dearly, he had allowed himself to be cheated into offering it to another. He did no such thing. And he knew that the cheating had been his own. Yeah, so you didn't allow yourself anything. You cheated. It was he who had done the evil. Julia, in showing her affection for him, had tendered her love to a man whom she believed to be free. He had intended to walk straight. He had not allowed himself to be enamored of the wealth possessed by this woman who had thrown herself at his feet. But he had been so weak that he had fallen in his own despite. You take your hat and you leave the room. You don't embrace Julia Ongar and kiss her. You take your hat and leave the room. That's not in your own despite. That's at your own will. There is, here we go. Whenever you get, there is, I suppose, whenever you get, I suppose, or we must suppose, you know that Tony's going to get on his high horse and pontificate for a while. We have to put up with him because he's one heck of a storyteller. So let's see what he has to say to us. There is, I suppose, no young man possessed of average talents and average education who does not early in life lay out for himself some career with more or less precision. Some career which is high in its tendencies and noble in its aspirations, and to which he is afterwards compelled to compare the circumstance of the life which he shapes for himself. In doing this, he may not attempt perhaps to lay down for himself any prescribed amount of success which he will endeavor to reach, or even the very pathway by which he will strive to be successful, but he will tell himself that what are the vices which he will avoid, and what are the virtues which he will strive to obtain. Will he do that, Tony? Really? So will he take a pittance of a salary as a postal inspector, but still buy horses and run to hounds? Even though he can't afford it? Will he do that? Few young men ever did this with more precision than it had been done by Harry Clavering, and few with more self-confidence. Very early in life he had been successful, so successful as to enable him to emancipate himself not only from his father's absolute control, but almost also from any interference on his father's part. He has a stipend. He is a fellow. He's a success, in a way. It had seemed to be admitted that he was a better man than his father, better than the other Claverings, the jewel of the race, the Clavering to whom the family would in future years look up, not as their actual head, but as their strongest prop and most assured support. He had said to himself that he would be an honest, truthful, hard-working man, not covetous after money, though conscious that a laborer is worthy of his hire, and conscious also that the better the work done by the better the wages should be. Then he had encountered a blow, a heavy blow from a false woman, and he had boasted to himself that he had borne it well, as a man should bear all blows. And now, after all these resolves and all these boastings, he found himself brought by his own weakness to such a pass that he hardly dared to look in the face of any of his dearest and most intimate friends. I'm no fan of either one of these two young people, but a little note of defense here for Julia Brabazon that was. She was not false to him. She told him, I do love you, but I am going to marry a wealthy man because otherwise I will disappear. He was not remiss in telling himself all this. He did draw the comparisons ruthlessly between the character which he had intended to make of his own and that which he now had justly earned. He did not excuse himself. We are told to love others as ourselves, and it is hard to do so. But I think that we may never hate others, never despise others, as we are sometimes compelled by our own convictions and self-judgment to hate and despise ourselves. Really, Tony? Spent a long time despising yourself, have you? Oh, God. He's almost done, don't worry. Harry, as he walked home on this evening, was lost in disgust at his own conduct. He could almost have hit his head against the walls or thrown himself beneath the wagons as he passed them, so thoroughly was he ashamed of his own life. Even now, on this evening, he had escaped from Onslow Crescent, barely escaped, without having declared any purpose. And what Trollope means by barely escaped is that he didn't just talk to Cecilia Burton. He also talked to her husband, just briefly. And if it had been any longer, it would have been horrible, so he got out just in time. Twice on this day he had escaped, almost by subterfuge. Once from Burton's office, and now again from Cecilia's presence. How long was this to go on? Or how could life be so endurable to him under such circumstances? In parting from Cecilia, and promising to write at once, and promising to come again in a few days, he had some idea in his head that he would submit his fate to the arbitrament of Lady Ongar. No, no. You send her a note telling her you must not see her again. You don't go and see her and ask her what she thinks. At any rate, he must, he thought, see her, and finally arrange with her what the fate of both of them should be, before he could make any definite statement of his purpose in Onslow Crescent. The last tender of his hand had been made to Julia, and he could not renew the former promises to Florence's behalf till he had been absolved by Julia. You are a weak sop of a man. You know perfectly well Julia is not going to absolve you. This may at any rate be pleaded on his behalf, that in all the workings of his mind at this time there was very little personal vanity. Very personally vain he had been when Julia Brabazon, the beautiful and noble-born Julia, had first confessed at Clavering that she loved him. But that vanity had been speedily knocked out of the head by her conduct to him. Men, when they are jilted, can hardly be vain of conquest which has been led to such a result. Since that, there had been no vanity of that sort. His love to Florence had been open, honest, and satisfactory, but he had not considered himself to have achieved a wonderful triumph at Stratton, Florence's home. No, Florence just comes to him by the by. And when he found that Lord Ongar's widow still loved him, that he was still regarded with affection by the woman who had formerly wounded him, there was too much of pain, almost of tragedy, in his position to admit of vanity. He would say to himself that, as far as he knew his own heart, he thought he loved Julia the best, but nevertheless he thoroughly wished that she had not returned from Italy, or that he had not seen her when she had so returned. He had promised to write, and that he would do this very night. He had failed to make Cecilia Burton understand what he intended to do, having indeed hardly himself resolved, but before he went to bed he would both resolve and explain to her his resolution. Immediately, therefore, upon his return, he sat down at his desk with a pen in his hand and the paper before him. At last the words came. I can hardly say that they were the product of any fixed resolve made before he commenced the writing. I think that his mind worked more fully when the pen was in his hand than it had done during the hour during which he had sat listless, doing nothing, struggling to have a will of his own, but failing. The letter, when it was written, was as follows, and here Trollope gives us the whole letter. Trollope was well known, even by this point in his career, as excellent with letters, and occasionally in the course of this book we have seen letters or bits of letters, but sometimes he's left them out, and he knows perfectly well in this chapter that if he left this letter out, his fans would egg him in the street. So he gives us the whole thing. Not an easy letter for Harry to write. Dear Mrs. Burton, I said that I would write tomorrow, but I am writing now, immediately on my return home. Whatever else you may think of me, pray be sure of this, that I am most anxious to make you know and understand my own position, at any rate as well as I do myself. I tried to explain it to you when I was with you this evening, but I fear that I failed, and when Mr. Burton came in, I could not say anything farther. I know that I have behaved very badly to your sister, very badly, even though she should never become aware that I have done so. Not that it is possible, for if she were to be my wife tomorrow, I should tell her everything. But badly as you must think of me, I have never for a moment had a premeditated intention to deceive her. I believe you do know on what terms I had stood with Miss Brabazon before her marriage, and that when she married, whatever my feelings might be, there was no self-accusation. And after that you know all that took place between me and Florence till the return of Lord Ongar's widow. Up to that time everything had been fair between us. I had told Florence of my former attachment, and she had probably thought but little of it. Such things are so common with men. Some change happens as had happened with me, and a man's second love is often stronger and more worthy of a woman's acceptance than the first. At any rate, she knew it, and there was, so far, an end of it. And you understood also how very anxious I was to avoid delay in our marriage. Remember, when we come back to Harry and Florence, he's eager for them to get married right away. It's Florence who's dragging her heels and saying we shouldn't marry when you can't afford it. No one knows that better than you, not even Florence, for I have talked it over with you so often, and you will remember how I begged you to assist me. I don't blame my darling Florence. She was doing what she deemed best, but oh, if she had only been guided by what you once said to her. Then Lord Ongar's widow returned, and dear Mrs. Burton, though I fear you think ill of her, you must remember that as far as I know, or as you know, or I, she has done nothing wrong, has been in no respect false since her marriage. As to her early conduct to me, she did what many women have done, but what no woman should do. But how can I blame her, knowing how terrible has been my own weakness? But as to her conduct since her marriage, I implore you to believe with me that she has been sinned against grievously, and has not sinned. Well, as you know, I met her. It was hardly unnatural that I should do so, as we are connected. But whether natural or unnatural, foolish or wise, I went to her often. I thought at first that she must know of my engagement, as her sister knew it well and had met Florence. But she did not know of it, and so, having none near her that she could love, hardly a friend but myself, grievously wronged by the world and her own relatives, thinking that with her wealth she could make some amend to me for former injury, she... Dear Mrs. Burton, I think you will understand it now, and will see that she, at least, is free from blame. I am not defending myself. Of course, all this should have been without effect on me. But I had loved her so dearly. I do love her still so dearly. Love like that does not die. When she left me, it was natural that I should seek someone else to love. When she returned to me, when I found that in spite of her faults, she had loved me through it all, I yielded and became false and a traitor. I say that I love her still, but I know well that Florence is far nobler woman of the two. Florence never could have done what she did. In nature, in mind, in acquirement, in heart, Florence is the better. The man who marries Florence must be happy with any woman, to be happy if any woman can make a man happy. Notice he's not talking that he will do it anymore. A man who marries her will feel this way. Of her of whom I now speaking, I know well that I cannot say that. How then, you will ask, can I be fool enough, having had such a choice, to doubt between the two? How is it that a man doubts between vice and virtue, between honor and dishonor, between heaven and hell? But all this is nothing to you. I do not know whether Florence would take me now. I am well aware that I have no right to expect that she should. But if I understand you aright this evening, she as yet has heard nothing of all this. What must she think of me for not writing to her? But I could not bring myself to write in a false spirit, and how could I tell her all that I have now told you? I know that you wish that our engagement should go on. Dear Mrs. Burton, I love you so dearly for wishing it. Mr. Burton, when he shall have heard everything, will, I fear, think differently. We're about to see that. For me, I feel that I must see Lady Ongar before I can again go to your house, and I write now chiefly to tell you that that is what I have determined to do. I believe she is now away in the Isle of Wight, but I will see her as soon as she returns. After that, I will either come to Onslow Crescent or send. Florence will be with you by then. She, of course, must know everything, and you have my permission to show this letter to her if you think well to do so. Most sincerely and affectionately yours, Harry Clavering. That is his letter to Cecilia Burton. And no matter what else you can say about it, you can say one thing very clearly. It says and resolves nothing. Nothing. It says and resolves nothing. It is as weak a letter as you could possibly write. It doesn't state Harry's current position. It doesn't state the state of his heart. It defers all of this to another person, to a third party. When he's writing to the mother of the woman he's wronging. But anyway, let's see. This he delivered himself the next morning to the door at Onslow Crescent, taking care not to be there till after Theodore Burton had gone from home. He doesn't want to run into the husband. He left a card also, so that it might be known not only that he had brought it himself, but that he had intended Mrs. Burton to be aware of that fact. Then he went and wandered about, and passed his day in misery, as such men do when they are thoroughly discontented with their own conduct. This was the Saturday on which Lady Ongar returned with her Sophie from the Isle of Wight, but on that premature return Harry knew nothing, and therefore allowed the Sunday to pass without going to Bolton Street. On the Monday morning he received a letter from home which made it necessary, or induced him to suppose it to be necessary, that he should go home to Clavering, at any rate for one day. So he doesn't know Julia's home, and circumstances are conspiring to keep them apart for a bit of time. This he did on the Monday, sending a line to Mrs. Burton to say whither he had gone, and that he should be back by Wednesday night or Thursday morning, and imploring her to give his love to Florence if she would venture to do so. Mrs. Burton would know what must be his first business in London on his return, and she might be sure that he would come or send to Onslow Crescent when that was over. But between then and now, she will get the letter from Sophie Gordeloup. Harry's letter, the former and longer letter, Cecilia had read over till she knew it nearly by heart, before her husband's return. She well understood that he would be very hard upon Harry. He had been inclined to forgive Clavering for what had been remiss, to forgive the silence, the absence from the office, the want of courtesy to his wife, till Harry had confessed his sin. But he could not endure that his sister should seek the hand of a man who had declared himself to be in doubt whether he would take it, or that any should seek it for her in her ignorance of all the truth. His wife, on the other hand, simply looked to Florence's comfort and happiness. That Florence should not suffer the pang of having been received and rejected was all to Cecilia. All she's thinking about is saving Florence from heartbreak. Of course she must know it some day, the wife had pleaded to her husband. He is not the man to keep anything secret. But if she is told when he has returned to her and is good to her, and the happiness of the return will cure the other misery. But Burton would not submit to this. To be comfortable at present is not everything, he said. If a man be so miserably weak that he does not even know his own mind, Florence would be better to take her punishment and be quit of him. Cecilia had narrated to him with passable fidelity what had occurred upstairs while he was sitting alone in the dining room. Remember, he intentionally doesn't join them. that she, in her anger, had at one moment spurned Harry Clavering, and that in the next she had knelt to him, imploring him to come back to Florence. Those two little incidents she did not tell to her husband. Harry's adventures with Lady Ongar, as far as she knew them, she described accurately. "I can't make any apology for him. Upon my life, I can't," said Burton. "If I know what it is for a man to behave ill, falsely, like a knave in such matters, he is so behaving." So Theodore Burton spoke as he took his candle and to go away to his work. But his wife had induced him to promise that he would not write to Stratton or take any other step in the matter till he had waited 24 hours for Harry's promised letter. The letter came before the 24 hours were expired, and Burton, on his return home on Saturday, found himself called upon to read and pass judgment upon Harry's confession. "What right has he to speak of her as his darling Florence?" he exclaimed, "while he is confessing to his own knavery?" "But if she is his darling," pleaded the wife. "Trash! But the word from him in such a letter is simply an additional insult. And what does he know about this woman who has just come back? He vouches for her, but what can he know of her? Just what she tells him. That's what. He is simply a fool." "But you cannot dislike him for believing her word." "Cecilia," he said, holding down the letter as he spoke, "you are so carried away by your love for Florence and your fear lest the marriage which has been talked about should not take place, that you shut your eyes to this man's true character." Theodore Burton is being harsh, but he is true. Can you believe any good of a man who tells you to his face that he's engaged to two women at once? "I think I can," said Cecilia, hardly venturing to express so dangerous an opinion above her breath. "And what would you think of a woman who did so?" "Ah, that is different. I cannot explain it, but you know that it is different. I know that you would forgive a man anything and a woman nothing." To this she submitted in silence, having probably heard the reproof before, and he went on to finish the letter. "Not defending himself!" he exclaimed. "Then why does he not defend himself? Why, when a man tells me he does not or cannot defend himself, I know that he is a sorry fellow, without a spark of spirit." "I don't think that of Harry. Surely that letter shows spirit." "Such a one as I would be ashamed to see in a dog." Pass over that in silence. "No man should ever be in a position in which he cannot defend himself. No man, at any rate, should admit himself to be so placed. Wish that he should go on with his engagement. I do not wish it at all. I am sorry for Florence. She will suffer terribly, but the loss of such a lover as that is infinitely lesser loss than would be gained by such a husband. You had better write to Florence and tell her not to come." "Oh, Theodore." "That is my advice." "But there is no post between this and Monday," said Cecilia, temporizing. "Then send her a message by the wires." "You cannot explain this by telegram, Theodore. Besides, why should she not come? Her coming can do no harm. If you were to tell your mother now of all this, it would prevent the possibility of things ever being right. Things, that is, this thing, never will be right," he said. "But let us see. She will be here on Monday, and if you think it best, you can tell her everything. Indeed, she must be told when she is here, for I could not keep it from her. I could not smile and talk to her about him and make her think that all is right. Not you. I should be very sorry if you could. But I think I could make her understand that she should not decide upon breaking with him altogether. And I think I could make her understand... Hang on a second here. Come here. There you go. And I think I could make her understand that she ought not to do so." "But you wouldn't do that, Theodore?" "I would if I thought it my duty. But at any rate, she must come, and we can talk of that tomorrow." As to Florence's coming, Burton had given way, beaten, apparently, by that argument about the post. Again, not only is Trollope returning to the postal system, but also it's vital. All of this would change if they had cell phones, or even telephones. All of this would change. On the Sunday, very little was said about Harry Clavering. Cecilia studiously avoided the subject, and Burton had not so far decided on dropping Harry altogether as to make him anxious to express any such opinion. After all, such dropping or not dropping must be the work of Florence herself. It's a very good point, and it's nice that Trollope and Theodore Burton remember it. On the Monday morning, Cecilia had a further triumph. On that day, her husband was very fully engaged, having to meet a synod of contractors, surveyors, and engineers to discuss which of the remaining thoroughfares of London should not be knocked down by the coming railways. And he could not absence himself from the Adelphi. He stuck at work. It was therefore arranged that Mrs. Burton should go to the Paddington station and meet her sister-in-law. She therefore would have the first word with Florence, and the earliest opportunity of impressing the newcomer with her own ideas. "Of course you must say something to her of this man," said her husband, "but the less you say the better. After all, she must be left to judge for herself." In all matters such as this, in all matters of tact, of social intercourse, and of conduct between man and man or man and woman, Mr. Burton was apt to be eloquent in his domestic discussion and sometimes almost severe. But the final arrangement of them was generally left to his wife. He enunciated principles of strategy, much, no doubt, to her benefit, but she actually fought the battles. And that's the battle that is coming up to her now, is that she's got to deal with Florence. She's got to somehow make this mess of a situation known to Florence that Harry Clavering is still postponing saying where he stands. He still is. It's all on Julia now, which is totally unfair to everybody, including Julia. But that's where we are now. So we're going to continue bolting towards the end here. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I will be back. Thank you.